Welcome to another episode of the White Book by Makavelli Decoded. In this episode, we are looking at Chapter 1977, Conspiracies, page 78, Excerpt 10 from Chapter 8, You Are the Answer of None Dare Call a Conspiracy by Gary Allen. So, None Dare Call a Conspiracy by Gary Allen with Larry Abraham. Let's go to Chapter 8. Chapter 8, You Are the Answer. Many people cannot refrain from rationalizing. After reading this book, some will bemoan the fact that the situation is hopeless. These will be many of the same people who, before reading this book, really did not believe the problems facing us were serious. Some people wake up and give up in the same week. This is, of course, just exactly what the insiders want you to do. The conspiracy can be defeated. The insiders are not omnipotent. It is true that they control important parts of the federal government, high finance, and the mass media, but they do not control everything, or the vice would already have been closed. We might say the conspiracy controls everything, but you are their Achilles heel if you are willing to fight. There is an old cliche in sports that quitters never win and winners never quit. We need 1 million Americans who are not quitters, but moreover, who have the will to win. Of course, you can't buck the conspiracy head on, trying to fight it on its home grounds. But the insiders are vulnerable to an end run. You and thousands of others like you can make an end run if you want to. It is our intention in this closing chapter to show you why it can be done and how you can do it. The timing for an end run has never been better. What Barry Goldwater said in 1964, people were willing to believe in 1968. Most people who voted for Nixon did so because he promised to balance the budget, not establish wage and price controls, slash government spending, not multiply it, cut welfare, not push for a guaranteed annual income, and stand firm against the communists, not lead the Red Chinese into the UN, build America's defenses, not continue to unilaterally disarm us, and stop aid and trade with our avowed communist enemies, not double it. These were the issues which supposedly differentiated Nixon from Humphrey. Now we see that Nixon has repudiated his own promises and carried out those of his opponent. By 1972, millions of Americans will have concluded that there is little difference between the leadership of the two major parties, and more people are beginning to realize that there is a tiny clique of conspirators at the top which controls both the Democrat and Republican parties. The one thing these conspirators cannot survive is exposure. The insiders are successful only because so few of their victims know what is being planned and how insiders are carrying out those plans. Conspiracies can operate only in the dark. They cannot stand the truthful light of day. Once any sizable minority of the American people becomes aware of the conspiracy and what it is up to, the many decades of patient planning and work by the insiders in this country can be destroyed in an amazingly short period of time. This job is largely a matter of getting others to realize that they have been conned and are continuing to be conned. You must become the local arm of the world's largest floating university. But before you can go to work pointing out these conspiratorial facts to others, you must know the facts yourself. This book is designed to give you these facts and can be your greatest tool. It is available on tape cassettes so that you can virtually memorize its contents by listening to it repeatedly while you are washing the dishes or driving to and from work. The concept of an army of individuals, which is dedicated to exposing the conspiracy, frightens the insiders because it works outside the channels which they control. Richard Nixon has said of the Republican Party, "We've got to have a tent everyone can get into." The Democrats have obviously believed that for a long time. But a party must be based on principles or it has no justification for existence. Bringing socialists into the Republican Party theoretically may broaden the base, but in reality serves only to disenfranchise those who believe in a constitutional republic and the free enterprise system. In 1972, the Republicans will try to make you forget that Richard Nixon was elected on George Wallace's platform, but has been carrying out Hubert Humphrey's. The pitch will be party unity. If not Nixon, then who? Will be the typical response to complaints about Nixon's actions. But unity with evil is evil. During the campaign of 1972, Nixon will again talk conservatively, while the CFR's Democrat candidate will sound frighteningly radical in order to stampede you into accepting Nixon as the lesser of two evils. The establishment may even run its John Lindsay or Eugene McCarthy as a far-left third or fourth party candidate in order to split the Democratic Party and re-elect Richard Nixon with a comparatively small number of votes. It is only logical that the insiders will try to apply the coup de grace against America through a Republican president simply because most people cannot believe that a Republican could be soft on communism or would jeopardize our liberty or sovereignty. The watchdogs tend to go to sleep with the Republican in office. Democrats and Republicans must break the insider control of their respective parties. The CFR types and their flunkies and social climbing opportunistic supporters must be invited to leave, or else the patriots must leave. It is up to you to put the politicians on the spot and make the CFR insiders a campaign issue. This can be accomplished easily by creating the base of thinking that will oppose their positions. The socialists must be forced to gather into one party. The conspiracy doesn't want the resultant clear distinction between party ideologies. The insiders want the issues between the parties to be cloudy and gray, centering on personalities, not principles. Neither party can come out strongly against socialism as long as it is pushing socialist programs. But that is the way the insiders want it. The issue, very simply, is the enslavement of you and your children. Just because many of these insiders are theoretically Americans, don't think they will spare this country the terror they have brought to 30 others through their hired communist thugs. To the insiders, the world is their country, and their only loyalty is to themselves and their fellow conspirators. Being an American means no more to them than being an honorary citizen of Bali would mean to you. It has not bothered their consciences one iota that millions of your fellow human beings have been murdered, including 50,000 of your own sons in Vietnam. In order to solidify their power in the United States, they will need to do here the same thing they have done in other countries. They will establish and maintain their dictatorship through stark terror. The terror does not end with the complete takeover of the republic. Rather, then terror just begins, for total, all-encompassing terror is an absolute necessity to keep a dictatorship in power. And terror does not mean merely punishing the enemies of the new order. Terror requires the murdering and imprisoning of people at random, even many of those who helped them come to power. Those who are complacent and hope to escape the terror because they were not involved in politics or resisted the new order coming to power must be made by you to understand that this all-encompassing need for terror includes them especially, that they cannot escape by doing nothing. What can we expect from the conspiracy during the next few years? Here are 14 signposts on the road to totalitarianism compiled some years ago by historian Dr. Warren Carroll and a refugee from Yugoslavian communism, Mike Dejornovic. The list is not in any particular order, nor is the order of any particular significance as given here, But the imposition of any one of these new restrictions on liberty, none of which was in effect when the list was compiled, would be a clear warning that the totalitarian state is very near, and once a significant number of them, perhaps 5, has been imposed, we can rationally conclude that the remainder would not be far behind, and that the fight for freedom and the preservation of the Republic has been lost in this country. 14 signposts to slavery. 1. Restrictions on taking money out of the country and on the establishment or retention of a foreign bank account by an American citizen. 2. Abolition of private ownership of handguns. 3. Detention of individuals without judicial process. 4. Requirements that private financial transactions be keyed to Social Security numbers or other government identification so that government records of these transactions can be kept and fed into a computer. 5. Use of compulsory education laws to forbid attendance at presently existing private schools. 6. Compulsory non-military service. 7. Compulsory psychological treatment for non-government workers or public school children. 8. An official declaration that anti-communist organizations are subversive and subsequent legal action taken to suppress them. 9. Laws limiting the number of people allowed to meet in a private home. 10. Any significant change in passport regulations to make passports more difficult to obtain or use. 11. Wage and price controls, especially in a non-wartime situation. 12. Any kind of compulsory registration with the government of where individuals work. 13. Any attempt to restrict freedom of movement within the United States. 14. Any attempt to make a new major law by executive decree, that is, actually put into effect, not merely authorized as by existing executive orders. As you are no doubt aware, President Nixon already has invoked numbers 1, 11, and 14. Steps 2, 3, 6, 7, 9, 12, and 13 already have been proposed, and some are actively campaigned for by organized groups. As of January 1st, 1972, banks must report to the government any deposit or withdrawal over $5,000. The next step will be to restrict the taking of money out of the country. Big Brother is watching your bank account. Increased government control over many kinds of private schools is proposed annually in many state legislatures. Compulsory non-military service, a universal draft of all young men and women, with only a minority going into the armed services, has been discussed by the Nixon administration as an alternative to the draft. Sensitivity training is already required for an increasing number of government workers, teachers, and school children. As long ago as 1961, Victor Reither proposed that anti-communist groups and organizations be investigated and placed on the Attorney General's subversive list. The propaganda war in progress to force registration or confiscation of firearms is the number one priority of all the collectivists, and armed citizenry is the major roadblock to a totalitarian takeover of the United States. You are in this fight whether you want to be or not. Unless you are an insider, you are a victim. Whether you are a multimillionaire or a pauper, you have an enormous amount at stake. The insiders are counting on your being too preoccupied with your own problems or too lazy to fight back, while the chains of slavery are being fastened on you. They are counting on their mass media to con you, frighten you, or ridicule you out of saving your freedom. And most of all, they are counting on your thinking you can escape by not taking part in opposing their takeover. They are also counting on those of you who recognize the conspiracy becoming so involved with watching all moves that you become totally mesmerized by their machinations and thus become incapable of acting. The choice is yours. You can say, it can't happen here. But nearly every one of the 1 billion people enslaved by the communists since 1945 doubtless said the same thing. Or you can end run this whole conspiratorial apparatus. The choice you must make was enunciated by Winston Churchill when he told the people of England, "If you will not fight for right when you can easily win without bloodshed, if you will not fight when your victory will be sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you will have to fight with all odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival." Because we have ignored warning after warning, we are now at that place in history. Unless you do your part now, you will face a further choice, also described by Mr. Churchill. He said, "There may be an even worse fate. You may have to fight when there is no hope of victory, because it is better to perish than live as slaves." What will you do? If you are unwilling to get involved because you feel it may be bad for business or may jeopardize your social respectability, just look into the eyes of your children and tell them that making a buck and climbing the social ladder are more important to you than they are. This is the end of our case. If you have decided not to do anything about it, then you can close this book, read no further, and turn out the light. That is just what you will be doing for the United States of America, and may God help us, and may He have mercy on your soul. If you decide that you will do something, that you at least are not yet controlled, read on, pick up the ball we are tossing you, and with thousands of others, let's end run the conspiracy. Here's how. The 4 keys in this program are: 1. You. What you do now is, of course, the key to this whole operation. If you delay, your motivation will wane, your concern will recede, but the danger will increase. Remember, the insiders don't care how much you know about their conspiracy, so long as you don't do anything about it. So keep reading and then act. 2. This book, none dare call it conspiracy. In writing this book, we have tried to give a concise overall picture of the nature of the conspiracy. We wrote it not only to explain the conspiracy, but to give you a complete program of action now, so that the many yous around the country would not necessarily have to be articulate salesmen to make your end run. You can simply pass this book out and let it do the job for you. The conspiracy may be able to stifle publicity on this book and keep it off the magazine rack at your local supermarket, but they can't stop you from distributing it to friends, neighbors, relatives, and business associates, and especially in your precinct. With a potential 30 million distribution of this book to those mentioned above, and in a manner yet to be described, you will create a base of opinion that will throw the insiders out. It is quite possible that in distributing this book, questions will come up concerning certain statements and conclusions with which you are not able to deal. There are a number of organizations that have well-documented material on all subjects raised in this book, but after considerable personal research, the author has concluded that the organization which is the leader in this field has had the most experience and is doing the best job of exposing the conspiracy is the John Birch Society. Footnote: The Berkeley Gazette stated in an editorial of August 26, 1971, commenting on the John Birch Society's 1958 10-point predictions for the United States, "Whatever else, call him, Robert Welch, correct. Write Box 8352, San Marino, California, 91108, for copy of editorial." Doesn't it appear strange that this organization, which works towards decentralization of political power and the exposure of the insiders, should be so vilified by the mass media, while the Council on Foreign Relations, which promotes centralization of power in the hands of a few within a world government, is practically never mentioned? So contact the John Birch Society for further backup information. Belmont, Massachusetts, 02178, San Marino, California, 91108, or check your telephone directory for the nearest American Opinion bookstore. 3. Your precinct. The precinct is the lowest denominator in our political structure. Any politician will agree that whoever reaches and influences the most people in the precinct wins the election. When you break down the job to be done to this least common denominator, it doesn't seem to be nearly as big a job as when you look at those millions of votes that needed to be switched. Many elections are won or lost by less than 5 votes per precinct. Remember that every vote switch you can accomplish by planting the seed with your book really amounts to 2 votes, as it takes one from the other side. Start your end run in your own precinct now. Lists of registered voters are available from your county registrar. With everyone working within his own precinct, the hit and miss efforts of prior years will be avoided and organization will be added to this effort. A blanket coverage of your precinct will create talk between neighbors on this subject and thereby greatly increase the number of persons reading this book. 4. Your congressman. You have now completed the 3 simple basic moves in your end run. Barring a wholesale awakening by the American people, it is probably wishful thinking to believe that the CFR's hold on the presidency can be broken in 1972. But it is possible to block the insiders' men in the House of Representatives. Congress can still lift a powerful voice against the conspiracy if only it would. It can also throw a searchlight onto the CFR's stranglehold on the executive branch of the government. No burglar tries to rob a house when a spotlight is on him. With your effort, Congress can be that spotlight. It is at the congressional level that the conspiracy can be delayed, at least until there is sufficient strength to rout it. But your local congressional candidates must be forced to take a public stand on the Council on Foreign Relations, its goals, and its power in the federal government. And once your candidate is elected, you must make sure that he does not submit to the incredible pressure which will be put upon him in Washington to compromise his principles. The congressman for whom you are laying the base for election must be as steadfast in Washington as he is at home in personal conversation with you. Keep in mind that a congressman must return to his constituents every 2 years for reapproval. How would you like to be a congressman who had voted for any one of the 14 signposts to slavery, asking to be elected by constituents who had read None Dare Call It a Conspiracy? It is therefore easier to keep a congressman on the straight and narrow than a senator or the president. The latter run less frequently than congressmen and represent tremendously larger geographical areas. Although it is not easy, it is still possible for a good congressman to finance his campaign from within his district and not be dependent on the insiders for campaign contributions. If there are no congressional candidates worth supporting in your area at this time, support one or more in other areas. Never contribute money to the Republican or Democratic National Committee. That money, except in token amounts, will never reach anti-CFR establishment candidates, most of whom suffer from a severe shortage of funds, at least until they are well established. Only contribute your campaign dollars to those who are committed to fighting the conspiracy. A candidate running on good conservative principles is not enough. We've had many such candidates, and although most of them are very good men, they never come to grips with the real problems, exposing those behind the world socialist movement. So, organize your end run, pass out your books, and then keep your eagle eye on your congressman and his voting record. This end run concept we are suggesting is not just the game we are playing, even though we use a football term. To summarize, you do not necessarily have to be an articulate salesman to make this end run. You do not necessarily have to know all the ins and outs of the total conspiracy. The book is intended to do this for you. All you have to do is find the wherewithal to purchase the books and one way or another see that you blanket your precinct with them. Then force your congressman to stand up to the CFR establishment. It is simple. It is straightforward. It is a workable plan. With 30 million end runs being made during 1972, you can and will rout the conspiracy, turn the tide of history, and prevent the enslavement of yourself and your family. Remember, seeds planted in 1972 will pay off not only this year, but in 1974 and 1976. If we do not build a large counter-revolutionary base in 1972, the ballgame will be lost by 1976. That concludes this episode and reading for the White Book and None Dare Call It Conspiracy Chapter 8. If you would like to purchase a copy of None Dare Call It Conspiracy, it is available on Amazon.com. Paperback is $14.99. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free, and the audiobook is free with an Audible trial. Hardcover is $23.95. This book is a primer for anyone who wishes to understand the basic workings of the global network of insiders that is determined to wield power over all mankind in the coming New World Order. The special edition is updated with illustrations and charts for 2013. Introduction by U.S. Congressman John G. Schmitz. The story you're about to read is true. The names have not been changed to protect the guilty. This book may have the effect of changing your life. After reading this book, you will never look at national and world events in the same way again. None dare call it conspiracy will be a very controversial book. At first, it will receive little publicity, and those whose plans are exposed in it will try to kill it by the silent treatment. For reasons that become obvious as you read this book, it will not be reviewed in all the proper places or be available on your local bookstand. However, there is nothing these people can do to stop a grassroots book distributing system. Eventually, it will be necessary for the people and organizations named in this book to try to blunt its effect by attacking it or the author. They have a tremendous vested interest in keeping you from discovering what they are doing, and they have the big guns of the mass media at their disposal to fire the barrages at none dare call it conspiracy. By sheer volume, the experts will try to ridicule you out of investigating for yourself as to whether or not the information in this book is true. They will ignore the fact that the author about to conjecture. They will find a typographical error or argue some point that is open to debate. If necessary, they will lie in order to protect themselves by smearing this book. I believe those who poo-poo the information herein because psychologically many people would prefer to believe we are, because we all like to ignore bad news. We do so at our own peril. And you can see it has a 4.5-star review on average. 5 stars, 78%, 4-star, 12, 613. Still relevant. How the One World Order Ruined Richard Nixon. Great book. Rosetta Stone of Contemporary American Politics. Review of Conspiracy. There will be a link in the description below to purchase a copy of this and the White Book. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.